my first question, I wanted to ask about Slade in Flame because we recently covered it in our magazine, and I wanted to know what are some of your memories from filming that?
Well, the interesting part of the film, and this was 1975, I think it was released. So maybe 74, 75, we were filming it. I remember that we had to go up north to get the atmosphere of a northern place, like Newcastle or um, Manchester or up that north. It had to have a kind of northern feel about it, right? Um, Obviously, the script writer um, was Jane Birkin, who was a famous model years ago in the 60s. It was her brother, Andrew. So he met up with us. Our manager did not want us to make a jump around, like a jump around pop film, like a lot of 60s bands do. Although I did like Hard Day's Night by the Beatles, we were the idea of the film was to have something more true.
Mm.
So the plan was that we told um, Andrew Birkin some truths about stuff that happened in the Midlands and in London, right? And some of the stories sounded a little bit like Get Carter, which was a famous Michael Caine film, right? But anyway, the whole process that we'd never acted before. So, and I mean, we're not professional actors, but I think looking at it at the British Film Institute in May, it just, I could detach myself from that was me a long time ago, right? So I could, like a lot of actors, they say their films are made years ago and sit back and probably, oh, I remember what I was doing. Making the film was an experience because there was a new director called Richard Longcrane and there was a new actor called Tom Conte, and he wasn't very well known in our country, but he became famous after our film. Well, not because of our film, but for other films that he made. But the experience of working with actors, and I mean, it was a non-stop. In the film, there's a crash, the car crashes,
Mm.
and I'm being chased, right? So that sequence was filmed in London at 2 p.m. Sorry, 2 o'clock in the morning. And I remember there was a bacon butty van following us around to feed us. And we'd never done anything like this. So we stayed in London Hotel for 3 months, So she has arranged for us for all to bring our wives and have sweets and things like that. It was good. And the experience of the film is that we started to learn how films are made.
Mm.
So in other words, when we started to look at films after we made our film, we sort of knew how they got shots, how things were over the shoulder, or the way you do with television when people are filming you, then they take another shot of your back of your head and
Mm.
you move it around. With the film, it was all technique and it was new. And there was another guy called Gavrik Losi. I think he was an organizer. His father was a bit of a big noise in the States. Um, and David Putnam, who produced Chariots of Fire, he was involved. So we had some big players with us. But for us, like it's like the script, This is quite funny.
Yeah.
It's a bit like I didn't properly read the script, so I was busily filming there, and I was thinking, how does this film end? And he said, haven't you read the script yet? I said, oh well, I thought we get in this car. I hadn't read the rest, so obviously I had a thick script, and not being a regular actor, I was just looking at it like he says this, you say that, and that kind of stuff.
Mm.
And sticking to the dialogue of a film is not easy because I'm very chatty, and sometimes it might be, I think I should say it this way, or I think it'd be a lot better if I've got that girl, and all that.
And
And
did
it
they
was
let
like,
you?
and it was going, just a minute, Dave, I'm the director. And I was trying to rewrite the script because, but the thing I did, and Mark Lamode, who was he was a guy possibly responsible for really being behind the film and he coming back out again.
Mm.
So he said on TV years ago, he says, that Dave Hill is a really good actor. Either he's a really good actor or he's acting himself.
I did wonder that.
And I think that was fairly obvious when you're watching the film.
Yeah,
So when my wife come to see the film, right, this year, she hasn't seen it for 40 years, right? So
really.
she forgot it. And she's sitting there and she's going, said, hang on a minute. She said, how come you're the only one in the group that's getting girlfriends, she said. And, and my son's there and he's saying, who's that virgin in the back seat with snogging, Because there's no sex in the film, right? There's no swearing, but it was all this, snogging the bird. And she doesn't know who she is anyway, but Sarah Clear, I think her name was. She was in a film called That'll Be the Day, I think. So she was chosen because she'd been in I think it was David Essex film or something like that. But anyway, the experience of the actors, they're quite serious, Some of the sequences came natural to us in the sense of going on the stage, performing, when we're playing
Yeah,
and that. But then when you have to deal with some of the hard cases in the film, the one pulls nods there, so hey, and then there's those two tough guys. It was
yeah,
a
the action sequences. Yeah.
yeah, that sort of stuff. The the truth of the actual journey was it was based roughly on us because there were people who, you probably read this anyway, but there were all sorts of things in Michael Caine film where somebody's hanging out the window because he won't pay the bill,
Mm.
and it's that kind of mafia and club owners, and some rough stuff. It's in the Midlands and it was in London and it was up north. We knew some of these people anyway. There were always people, there's always something going on. The film's idea that Tom Conti is a big businessman and he says that groups are making it. So he sends a scout out to find a group that looked like they might make it. And that was the principle of the film. He wanted to make the group famous. So then he could use us to enhance his company. Well, that didn't happen to us. The only people that found us was the agent we had for years, and then eventually the fantastic manager we had, Chas Chandler. He was in the Animals, a group called the Animals, and he was Jimi Hendrix manager. So he saw us in one of those clubs in London because somebody said, "You want to see this band? They're really good." And we didn't write songs or anything, and he came to see us in this just around Bond Street somewhere. And it was one of those clubs where you go downstairs, a small stage, and we were up the corner. There was only about 10 people in, just grooving around. So he watched the whole set and he came across to us and he said, I think you're great. He said, I want a manager. I want to get your agent. And I want to do this. And it was just amazing what happened to us because we weren't getting anywhere in the Midlands. We were a good band. A lot of people liked us. And we always did different songs, we never did pop music. But Chaz kind of got into us, And then he encouraged us to write our own songs, which then led to the massive number ones in the end. Because said, you've learnt all these other songs by other people, now write your own with those influences. So we were like the Beatles. That's what the Beatles did. You see, Paul and John joined together in this group, and Paul and John wrote songs, and those two wrote history basically. Um, and in our band, we had a very similar thing with two people who were locked in on writing songs, and Chaz was very supportive, but he wanted the film to have a lasting quality to it. He wanted to make sure that years and years later, you don't look at it as some stupid 60s pop film, you know,
Yeah.
that there are a ton of them, you know, like a ton of groups that did daft films. They weren't acting, they were jumping around, like really corny films.
Yeah.
See, there's nothing with Slade in Flame, there is nothing corny about it. Even although the Americans didn't quite understand our language,
Mm.
we showed it in St. Louis, right? And they were all sitting there, and there's these jokes in the film, and they're not laughing because they don't understand the British humour, you know. And the Beatles film, they had to redo their spoken words because they couldn't understand.
Really?
Yeah, the Beatles had to redo because they couldn't understand because they were Liverpudlians, and they're really funny, all right, whack, and all this. And they're going, what's whack? And they're going, my God, I don't get this, and they had to restructure and slow the voices down so you can understand what they were saying. But the Beatles film was a lot of fun, but Chaz is not with us now, and I miss him dearly because he was like all and everything to us. He believed in us. He helped us make it. He kept us focused. But making that film was his idea. He said, "We've got to do something good here that will last." And when it first came out, we were massive. And in the film, it's a funny thing with films when they see a band people love and then they see you arguing in the film, they don't quite cope with that because the fans were only 14 when they watched it. So they're in love with you and then you're arguing. But there are a lot of humour in the film, as you probably know, stupid holding hose pipes and all, those things we were doing. And, everybody to do with the company were conning people. And there was also the element that some people got watches to play your song or stuff like that happens in America. In America they call it payola. Somebody gets a tip and then gets your airplay and things like that. Now with Slade that never happened because we never worked that way.
Mm.
Our success and our whole life was based on talent and perspiration. It was locked into the fact that we knew what to do. We knew we were good. We didn't have to fake anything. It took ages to make it though. But once we got our foot in the door and then the clothes, I mean, that's me back in the day, right? And you see the clothes, right?
Lift it up
Um,
slightly higher. I can't see
yeah,
that.
well, that's me. So the glitter guitar, the famous guitar, super young called, because in those days, it used to be people called superstars. But I had a number plate on a car and it was Yob 1. So the publicist says, "Wow, Dave, you ought to call you Super Yob." He says, "That's that number plate on your car." And it stuck with me. It's really funny.
Do you still have
Um,
that top, the super yob top?
eh?
Do you still have the super yob top, the outfit?
Not bad. I wouldn't get in it. I mean, that was like tight leather trousers, right? That's a top of a pop shop, that is. I can tell. It's because I got glitter on my forehead, in my hair. That's that guitar there is still with me now. My dad bought me that guitar, and that's a famous Slade guitar
Mm.
that has the sound of Slade in it, right? So I kind of keep that at home because you probably see I've got loads of guitars behind me. But Dad's guitar was something where we got no money, and Chaz said, "You want a better guitar, Dave?" I said, "Well, I'll go and ask my dad for the money," and I did. And I came to London and I found that guitar, in Shaftesbury Avenue in a music shop. And funny enough, it was in the window. Sometimes in life, something is meant. And I
Mm.
saw it and it almost spoke to me. And I didn't even play it at the time. I walked in, said to the guy, "What is that?" He said, "Well, it's a Gibson neck," he said, "but the body's been made by a Chinese guy in the Chinese Quarter just off Shaftesbury Avenue." I said, "Okay." He says his name's Sam Lee, like Lie. I said, "Oh." He said he makes loads of guitars. But there's something unique about it because he made the body, right? Whereas the neck is a Gibson, right? So that he put that neck onto a body he crafted, right? And he put a strange pickup there. And then he put the special pickup there. Now, that pickup, made in 1966, is a one off because in those days, when they made pickups, they have to wind them, and every pickup that came out is wind differently, subject to whoever wound it, right?
Mm.
Whereas now you go to get a guitar and you just get a load of them, and they're all factory made and they're all exactly the same. But the unique thing about this guitar, same with Eric Clapton, same with Peter Green, Fleetwood Mac, they all had these guitars from the 60s where the pickups were one offs. So you can't get that because it's a quirk of nature. It's the way it was made. Where now it's a bit like you can pick a guitar off a shelf and the next guitar sounds exactly the same.
Yeah.
But the unique sound of my guitar playing, and George Harrison had that sort of sound in the Beatles, and Eric Clapton and Peter Townsend and Jimi Hendrix. Our manager made Jimi Hendrix famous, and Jimmy had his guitar upside down. He's left-handed, and he was really fantastic guitar player, but very, very unique.
Yeah.
And I think Chaz always thought we were a unique band, and in a way, I think he believed we were like the Beatles to the 60s. We were like that to the 70s. And when somebody knows what they're doing, and because he was so experienced, we had to listen to him. And because we were only young, we were 18, here's a man well over 20, But because he managed Hendrix, it's a bit like you could never have thought that we would have met him ever, you know. But sometimes in life, you can be at the right place at the right time. And it was only somebody in London. We went down to make a couple of records for a French label, and the guy in the studio says, "Oh," he says, "I like them two songs." He says, "Have you got any more?" I said, "Yeah, we got loads. We got a stage show." He says, "Well, why don't you record an album for me and I'll pay for it?" And we said, "Oh, right. Well, we haven't got any money." So he lets us make this album. Then he says, "You'll get nowhere with Northern management. You need somebody in London. This is where the record companies are." So he seemed to know a club owner in London, quite well known. And we met him. And the club owner says, "Well, I can get you a couple of gigs, lads." He said, "But you need a manager." And he said, "I'll tell you something." He says, "There's a guy, you might have heard of him, called Chas Chandler." And we said, "The Chas Chandler?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "He's finished with Hendrix. He's not with him anymore." He says, "And now he's looking to help a band make it." And so he sent Chas Chandler to this club, and Chas saw us, and the rest is history. You know, what I'm saying is right place, right time. You
Yeah.
know,
Very much so.
that's how it all got off. Look, with the film, I think the experience of making the movie was quite funny when we had the premiere, because in the film there's a guy called Alan Lake, and he plays the singer. The cabaret
You get
singer.
picked out. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, his wife was Dinah Dawes. Did you know that?
Yeah.
famous dinosaurs. Yeah. Now he was really funny, and I met dinosaurs because of him. And he was a regular actor, and he would help us with the ways films are made, because you had a tendency to watch what the others were doing. But when you actually go to speak your part, you don't realize that you end up doing it half a dozen times. You walk in to say something, or you got a cigarette, and then suddenly you forgot the first word. And we had quite a bit of that. Where you have to keep doing it. The thing is, when you're making a movie, it can be extremely boring for you because when you're waiting for he'll say, right, we're doing the sequence in the club. He said, I don't need you right away, Dave. You might as well bugger off for the day. I said, oh, right. He said, no, because you'll be sitting here watching what the other members of the band. He says, the sequence for you will be later on. So he ended up either reading books or going out to buy clothes or something I was doing. So I knew there was what you call hanging about. And these people that do bit parts in EastEnders and things like that.
Yeah.
There's a guy in my band who was in EastEnders, and he said, sometimes you're there all day and you don't get the bit done. You have to come back.
Oh, God.
And he was in EastEnders for something. You don't actually know him, but he was in it. He said I always took books because it's extremely boring. You
Yeah.
know, that's what it's. It is on the one hand very interesting. It took 3 months to film, and then we didn't see anything for ages because it had to be mastered and all the rest of it. And then it was kind of like there were what you call the takes. They when they make the film, they have to go into the cutting room, and our manager would go in, and then there might be something he says. He says, "I don't like that scene. You want to cut that bit out." So you get people who actually are really good at cutting stuff. There's what was his name now? I just forgot his name. He's a famous director, David Lean. He made some of the most famous films ever in England. And the American guy, what's his name? The famous American producer, did all the. Um, I forgot his name now. He was this producer that we had. Uh, this producer that we know did the Lawrence of Arabia film, and he did a war film called. It was well, it was about there was war and there was all sorts of stuff. But he's my favorite director. And the American guy said when he saw Lawrence of Arabia, because there's an amazing scene when the horse is coming towards you, but it takes absolutely ages, and it's misty, and it's it's kind of like the tricks of what great producers do to make things work. So we were working with people who were not known to us, right? But they'd worked on other films. They'd been involved. But what we learned was when we went to see films after we made it, we realized we knew, in a way, it slightly spoiled it because we knew how they got that shot, or you're looking for it. So, oh, I see what he's doing there.
Yeah.
You do learn how movies are made. But we were gonna we were gonna make a follow-up.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, the the follow-up, the word Quatermass. You ever heard of Quatermass?
I
It's a
don't know.
famous film, right? Quatermass was a scary film about aliens, right? It was a big film in England. It's called Quatermass, and they get in the tubes and they grow bigger. Like, it's a really weird film. And he said, "Oh, it'd be really funny if we could call it the Quatermass experiment." And I said, "Quater?" He says, "Yeah." He said, "What we can do," he said, "in the first scene, You could be the experiment. I said, "All right." He said, "The only problem is, Dave, the experiment goes wrong and you're out of the film." I thought this is great. I've got one sequence. I'm the experiment and it went wrong.
I wish
Anyway,
they'd made that.
hmm?
I wish they'd have made that now. That'd be interesting to see.
Well, do you know? Yeah, quite, they're quite. It was almost like a carry-on film. It sounded like a joke. Sounded like something. No, um, what's his name? Norman Wisdom would have played, or something really ridiculous. But it was the manager says, "You're the experiment, Dave. I'm sorry, the rest of the band have got the rest of the film, but you're dead."
Yeah, it sounds great.
I'll have to say, it didn't get made.
Yeah, what a shame.
Yeah, well, but the whole thing with them refurbing, bringing back Slave and Flame and remastering it and making it brighter. And when we went to the British Film Institute on the 1st of May, it was really wonderful. Me and Nod and the band, and we went there, and it was a bit. I felt a bit like Tom Cruise because I was walking in, and we all got the gear on, we come walking in, and there was all actors and piles of people in the auditorium, and then we got these bouncers, following us and going, "Don't touch him." And I thought, don't ask for his autograph. You're not to touch him. And I felt like the Queen. Don't talk to her. I mean, we think it's a wonderful thing when you. I mean, I'm a 79 now. It's a wonderful thing that I've been in show business since I've been 13, right? Well, I wouldn't say I was in show business at 13, but I learned to play. At 18, I turned professional. Now, I've been in the profession near on 60 odd years, right? Not always successful at first, of course, but later on, huge. The success of the group now has moved up a level. The film had an effect, hence the tour that we're doing
Mm.
is a kind of, in a way, the film did really well at the box office. It didn't when it first came out, but it did this time. But the people at the Film Institute and all the actors and things, it was a nice feeling to remember something really good that we did. When people say, Joe, I never thought, never realized when I was 14 and I saw that film, I never realized then just how good it is, because you see, some of the films, you'd be embarrassed at some of the things that were done in the 60s.
Mm.
They're just really dreadfully corny. But I must compliment in to Chaz that he had a vision on it, and he was right. He says, make a film with substance. It's like making good records, isn't it? See, with our records, those records were classics, and they still are, and they don't die. They're like the Christmas song. Everybody remembers them. And I mean, I play all over the world. I've even toured Russia. Can you believe that? I
Oh,
toured Russia, and can you believe it was 40 below degrees? And I toured Russia. And I was looking around. It reminded when I first went to Russia, I went to Red Square and it was snowing. And I rung the wife and I says, I've just gone into the hotel and there's a famous film with Julie Christie called Dr. Zhivago. That was a 60s film, famous film, and it's about Russia. You see, I can't believe that film's on. I remember seeing it when I was young, right? And Julie Christie was like fantastic looking, Julie Christie. And it was like, it's snowing outside. We're in Russia. And we all had to go and buy these thick woolly hats they wear, these
yeah.
earmuffs, because you can't walk in it because you walk in it and your nose freezes.
I'll give you one from one of our readers. She wanted to know about you working with Black Sabbath in the early days, and
Yeah.
also, um, what does kind of the city mean to you, and what do you like remember from the scene back in Birmingham and back in Wolverhampton from back then?
Yeah. Well, there was Birmingham and there was Wolverhampton.
Yeah,
Wolverhampton is what you call a black country. It call it the black country because it's to do with factories. Most people worked in factories. A lot of music, I believe, came out of the working man in factories. Sabbath, I think Ozzy worked in where they was it a place where you to kill pigs or something. It's an abattoir. He works in an abattoir, which ended up becoming a studio. But Ozzy was working there. When I met him, they formed this group called Sabbath, and we were in Birmingham, right? So we were in the centre of where they live. And in those days, we had places called Mecca ballrooms. You'd have to look that up. But Mecca ballrooms existed all over our country. And there were places, what they call you have a dance there, Mecca, you
yeah,
know, you can sit and watch an act. Then when we play with Ozzy, we were right in the centre of Birmingham. And then they come in. And of course, this is the first time I met him. And they've all got thick, long hair and they've got black leather on, right?
yeah.
And and then they got this sound, the one song, Finish With My Woman, because she couldn't help me with my life. And they like, it was like early heavy metal, the way they sounded. In fact, they were the creators of heavy metal later because everybody copied them. They had a particular sound, an Ozzy's voice, and a look which attracted America. And they were absolutely huge in America. But when I first met them, neither of us had made it. Ozzy, Ozzy is an extremely funny man. He'll say something to you and you'll fall about laughing because he says it like someone's telling you straight. And it's so funny. The good things about Ozzy, the many years of his life, and when he was out of Sabbath, um, and he was being managed by Sharon. Now, I know Sharon. Her father was in management and Jet Records, and my manager, I was aware of Sharon because there's a guy that looks after us in London who looks after Sharon. So we saw Ozzy later. We did shows with them in America. But Ozzy, funny enough, did us a favour. He doesn't know he did us a favour because I told him in the end. He was going to do Reading Festival. And we'd had all these hits in the 70s. And then the hits dried up. So right towards the end of the 70s, we weren't selling records because it's normal that you have a period of success and then it closes down on you. It does to every band. So we survived by playing live, you see. Anyway, around about 1980, I had this crazy idea. True story. I'd got an old Rolls Royce and it was gold and it got Yob one on it. And I had this idea because we weren't selling records. I said, well, I think I'll form a business, rent a pop star. And it was like, I don't know what I was thinking. And it was a bit like, what? Anyway, it was just purely an idea. Um, so I got my brother-in-law to drive the one car. You could get me, you know, but kind of my manager, Chess Chandler, kind of rescued me. He rung me up and he said, Dave, he said, what are you doing? I says, well, I've got this wedding business. And he's going, what wedding business is it? He said, you can't be doing that. You can't drive a wedding car. I said, oh, I thought it was fun. And he says, anyway, he says, something's cropped up which could really help you right now. He said, so whatever you do, do not do the wedding business or maybe do it afterwards. Reading Festival was the biggest festival in our country. It was bigger than Glastonbury.
Mm.
And there were a lot of new bands on there, like UFO and Def Leppard, a new group, White Snake. There were lots on it. Ozzy was topping the bill on Sunday, and Ozzy got a new band that he was going to break America with his new group. But his band weren't ready to perform. So 2 days before the day he was to do the show, Reading were frantic. They were going, "What the heck are we going to do? There's all these people coming, and we haven't got Ozzy. He's not doing it." So we got the call. Our manager rang me, and he said, "Dave, this is a great opportunity. There'll be 40,000 people there, and it'll be a reminder to all those people of how great you are as a live band and the hits you've had." And what I hadn't thought was that the audience that we'd play to were at school buying our records, right? And they were now at college. So the place was packed, right? So we went down there, and it was like everybody's turning up in big limousines and dark shades. And we just come in an old Ford car. And we pulled in, and everybody's going, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, um, do you know?" And he said, "No, what?" I said, "Well, we're replacing Ozzy." He says, "What?" He says, "Yeah, he's not doing it." So he said, "But the DJ, Tommy Vance, is going to announce to the public that Ozzy can't do it, and we've got Slade." So he goes up on stage, and he did say to us, he said to us, "I think you will be a breath of fresh air to this festival, because most of the bands haven't got your kind of hits." Anyway, which made me feel confident. And my manager's there. Tommy Vance goes on and says, "I'm sorry to tell you, Ozzy will not perform." So there's a, rumble and all that. But he said, "We got at the last minute Slade." Then there was a roar, right? Oh my God, that's all right. So when we went on, my manager was sitting right by me on the stage, a big stage. And we went on, and we always do 3 songs non-stop, because we don't give anybody a chance to boo us, right? So we do 3 songs. So we obviously stuck a number one in there. So we whack through the 3 songs, and then there's a point where it stops, right? And Nod's got to go up to the mic and say, "All right." He
Mm.
didn't have to. It was a roar.
Wow.